Karim Al-Rahman stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, watching the Dubai skyline shimmer in the afternoon sun. At 32, he had already achieved what most people could only dream of: a vast business empire, global recognition, and a fortune that seemed to grow exponentially with each passing day. Yet, as he adjusted his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, a hint of irritation crossed his otherwise composed features. A marriage arrangement. He turned to face his father, Sheikh Hassan Al-Rahman, who sat comfortably in one of the leather chairs across from Karim's desk. "Father, we're living in 2025, not the Middle Ages." The older man's eyes crinkled with amusement. "The old ways often hold wisdom that the modern world has forgotten, my son. The Nasser family's influence in the technology sector would be invaluable to our expansion plans." Karim moved to his desk, picking up the folder containing information about his supposed bride-to-be. Samira Nasser, 28 years old, educated at Oxford, with an impressive track record in business strategy. Her photograph showed her wearing a partial veil that covered the right side of her face, an unusual choice for a business portrait. "And what's the story behind the veil?" Karim asked, his analytical mind already searching for potential problems. "That's not our concern," his father replied firmly. "The Nassers are one of the most respected families in their country. Their dedication to tradition is well known." Karim leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. The merger possibilities were undeniable. The Nasser family's cutting-edge technology patents could revolutionize his construction and development projects. It was a sound business decision, nothing more. "Have you met her?" Karim asked, studying the photograph more closely. "Briefly, during the preliminary discussions. She's different from what you might expect. Quiet, but there's a sharpness to her that reminds me of your mother." The mention of his mother, a brilliant businesswoman in her own right, gave Karim pause. His father rarely drew such comparisons. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, contracts, and arrangements. Karim approached his impending marriage like any other business deal, methodically reviewing terms and conditions, analyzing potential risks and benefits. His closest friend and business advisor, Daniel Reed, raised several concerns. "Are you sure about this, Karim?" Daniel asked during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "Arranged marriages can be complicated. There's so much you don't know about her." "It's a business arrangement," Karim replied coolly. "Nothing more. The Nasser family's technologies will give us the edge we need in the sustainable development sector." The day of their first meeting arrived with little fanfare. The Al-Rahman family's private majlis was prepared for the occasion, with traditional Arabic coffee and dates arranged on silver trays. Karim arrived early, reviewing business documents on his tablet while he waited. When Samira entered, accompanied by her father, Karim's first impression was of quiet grace. She wore a modern abaya in deep blue, the partial veil matching perfectly. Her visible features were striking. One dark eye that seemed to take in everything at once, high cheekbones and lips that held a hint of amusement. "Mr. Al-Rahman," she said, her voice carrying a musical lilt that caught him off guard. "I hope you'll forgive my directness, but I've reviewed your company's latest sustainability report. Your solar integration projects are impressive, but have you considered incorporating AI-driven energy management systems?" Karim blinked, momentarily thrown by her unexpected opening. Most of their competitors weren't even aware of their solar projects yet. "You've done your homework, Ms. Nasser, just as you've undoubtedly done yours," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "Shall we discuss how our company's strengths might complement each other?" For the next hour, they engaged in a discussion that left Karim both impressed and slightly unsettled. Her analysis of market trends was razor-sharp, her suggestions for integration both innovative and practical. Yet there was something else, something in the way she occasionally tilted her head or smiled at certain comments that suggested she was seeing far more than she revealed. As their families finalized the engagement details, Karim found himself studying his future wife with growing curiosity. She was clearly brilliant, but what was she hiding behind that veil? And why did he have the unsettling feeling that she could read him far better than he could read her? That evening, as he shared his impressions with Daniel over a video call, his friend's response was unexpected. "Be careful, Karim. Women like that, the ones who seem too perfect, they're usually hiding something big." Karim ended the call, walking to his window to watch the city lights below. The merger made perfect sense on paper. The marriage was a means to an end, nothing more. So why couldn't he shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far more complex than a simple business arrangement? The wedding was a grand affair, as expected of two prominent families. Yet amidst the opulent decorations and hundreds of guests, Karim found his attention repeatedly drawn to his bride's composed demeanor. Samira moved through the celebrations with effortless elegance, engaging guests in multiple languages and demonstrating an impressive knowledge of international business relations. Their new home, a luxurious villa overlooking the Arabian Gulf, quickly revealed the stark differences in their approaches to life. While Karim's space was minimalist and modern, designed for efficiency, Samira brought warmth to their shared areas. Traditional artworks appeared on walls, hand-woven rugs softened marble floors, and the scent of jasmine drifted through previously sterile rooms. One morning, 3 weeks after their wedding, Karim found Samira in their home office, surrounded by financial reports. She looked up as he entered, her visible eye bright with interest. "Your company's exposure to the European market is higher than publicly reported," she said without preamble. Karim stiffened. That information wasn't publicly available. "How did you—" "Pattern recognition," she replied, spreading out several documents. "The subsidiary holdings, the timing of certain acquisitions. It creates a clear picture if you know where to look. Have you considered the implications of the new EU regulations?" He had, in fact, been worried about exactly that issue. Standing behind her chair, he reviewed her analysis with growing amazement. She'd identified potential problems his own team had missed and proposed several elegant solutions. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, genuinely curious. Samira turned slightly, and though the veil covered half her face, he could sense her smile. "Because we're partners now, aren't we? In everything." The words were simple, but they stirred something unexpected in Karim. Partnership wasn't what he'd envisioned when agreeing to this arrangement. Yet as the weeks passed, he found himself increasingly relying on her insight. Their evenings developed a comfortable routine. They would share meals on their terrace, discussing business strategy and world events. Samira proved to be an excellent listener, often offering perspectives that challenged his thinking. But she rarely spoke about herself, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. Daniel's warnings echoed in Karim's mind during these moments. What was she hiding? Why? The constant veil? Yet every time his suspicions rose, Samira would do something that caught him off guard. Like the morning she organized breakfast for his entire office staff during a crucial project deadline, or her thoughtful questions about his childhood during their quiet evenings. The first real test of their partnership came unexpectedly. During a board meeting, one of their major projects was revealed to be significantly over budget. As the room erupted in concerned discussions, Samira, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stood up. "If I may," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. With methodical precision, she outlined a restructuring plan that would not only save the project, but potentially increase its profitability. The board members listened with increasing attention as she explained how to leverage their technology, patents to create a more efficient construction process. Later that evening, as they drove home, Karim found himself studying her profile. "You saved us today," he admitted. "We saved us," she corrected gently. "Your team laid the groundwork. I simply saw a pattern they missed." "Why do you always do that?" he asked, frustration seeping into his voice. "Deflect credit, hide behind modesty." Samira was quiet for a long moment, her hand absently touching her veil. "Sometimes," she finally said, "people see what they expect to see. It's easier to exceed expectations when they're low." The words haunted Karim that night as he lay awake, listening to the distant sound of waves. He'd assumed their marriage would be a simple business arrangement, but Samira was proving to be anything but simple. Every layer he thought he understood revealed another beneath it. His phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Found something interesting about the NASAs. Call me. Karim stared at the message, then at the closed door of Samira's separate bedroom. The sound of classical music drifted softly through the wall. She often listened to it while working late. His finger hovered over the call button, but something made him hesitate. For the first time since their marriage, he realized he didn't want to dig into her secrets, didn't want to view her through the lens of suspicion that had colored their early interactions. Whatever she was hiding behind that veil, behind her careful composure, she had already proven herself more valuable than any business alliance. He put the phone away without responding to Daniel's message. In the quiet of his room, Karim acknowledged a troubling truth. He was beginning to care about his wife not as an asset or a business partner, but as someone who might actually understand him. And that, more than any of her secrets, was what truly frightened him. The Al Rahman Group's annual charity gala was approaching, and for the first time in years, Karim found himself actually involved in the planning process. Usually, he'd simply make an appearance, write a check, and leave early. But Samira's enthusiasm for the event was oddly infectious. "These aren't just photo opportunities," she explained one evening as they reviewed proposals in their home office. "Each project has the potential to create lasting change." Her fingers traced over photographs of proposed community centers and educational initiatives. "Look at this one, a technology training program for young women. The impact could span generations." Karim watched her as she spoke, noticing how her entire face, or at least the visible part, lit up with genuine passion. It was so different from the calculated philanthropy he was used to, where every donation was measured against its PR value. The day of the gala arrived, and Samira had transformed their usual staid affair into something remarkable. Local artisans displayed their work alongside corporate sponsors. Students from community programs demonstrated their projects. The energy in the room was unlike anything Karim had experienced at these events before. "Your wife is quite extraordinary," remarked Sarah Chen, one of their major investors, as they watched Samira engage with a group of young tech entrepreneurs. "She's managed to turn a simple fundraiser into an actual celebration of community achievement." Before Karim could respond, Daniel appeared at his side. "Interesting choice of beneficiaries," he commented smoothly. "Did you know that several of these organizations have connections to her family's competitors?" "What are you implying?" Karim asked, a note of irritation creeping into his voice. "Just that it might be worth looking into where exactly all this money is going." Daniel shrugged. "She's been given quite a lot of control quite quickly." But as Karim observed Samira throughout the evening, what he saw challenged his friends' insinuations. She spoke with genuine warmth to everyone, from CEOs to service staff. When a young girl accidentally spilled juice on her expensive dress, Samira simply laughed, helped her clean up, and continued their conversation about the girl's robotics project. The highlight of the evening came during Samira's speech. Standing at the podium, her partial veil gleaming softly under the lights, she spoke not about charity but about investment in human potential. "Every person in this room has the power to change lives," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed space. "Not just with money, but with time, with knowledge, with genuine care for our community." Later that night, as they drove home, Karim found himself studying his wife with new eyes. "You really believe in all of this, don't you?" he asked quietly. Samira turned to him, her visible eye reflecting the passing city lights. "In all of what?" "This connection with people, community building. It's not just for show with you." She was quiet for a moment, her hand absently touching her veil, a gesture he'd come to recognize as a sign she was considering her words carefully. "When I was younger," she finally said, "someone took a chance on me when they had no reason, till they saw past the appearances. It changed my life. Sometimes that's all people need, someone to believe in their potential." The simple honesty in her voice stirred something in Karim. He thought about his own rise to success, the cold calculation that had driven every decision. When was the last time he'd done something simply because it was right, not because it served his interests? The next morning, instead of heading straight to his office, Karim made an unexpected stop at one of the community centers Samira had highlighted. He spent an hour touring the facility, watching as young people learned coding, business skills, and creative arts. Their enthusiasm reminded him of his own early days, before business became just about profit margins. When he finally arrived, at his office, he found several urgent messages from Daniel about some concerning information he'd uncovered about the Nasser family's past. For the first time, Karim felt a flicker of anger at his friend's constant suspicion. He was about to call Daniel when his assistant interrupted with an urgent matter. Their largest project in Europe was facing a crisis that could cost them millions. As Karim stared at the reports, his first instinct was to call Samira, not just because she might have a solution, but because he wanted to see that look of intense focus she got when tackling a complex problem. When had he started noticing these things about her? When had her presence become something he actively sought rather than merely tolerated? The ringing of his phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Daniel again. But before Karim could answer, another call came through from Samira. Looking at the two names on his screen, Karim realized he was standing at a crossroads. The choice he made now would define not just his response to the crisis, but perhaps the entire future of his relationship with his wife. Karim chose Samira's call, and it proved to be the right decision. Within hours, she had not only identified the root of their European crisis, but had also developed an innovative solution involving their new green technology patents. As they worked together late into the night, ordering takeout and covering his office walls with diagrams and flowcharts, Karim found himself repeatedly distracted by her enthusiasm, her quick mind, and the way she seemed to anticipate his thoughts before he expressed them. "You're staring again?" she said without looking up from her laptop, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'm trying to figure you out," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "Every time I think I understand you, you show me something new." She turned to face him then, her visible eyes studying him intently. "Perhaps you're just starting to actually look," she suggested softly. The moment was interrupted by Daniel. Bursting into the office, his face tight with concern. "Karim, we need to talk privately." He cast a pointed look at Samira. "Whatever you need to say can be said in front of my wife," Karim replied, noting with interest his own defensiveness. Daniel hesitated, then placed a folder on the desk. "Fine. Our investigators found some irregularities in the Nasser family's financial history. There are patterns of suspicious technology transfers, missing records, and a series of shell companies that were created to protect our patents during the technology embargo of 2020, Samira interrupted calmly. "All fully documented and cleared by international regulators. Would you like to see the paperwork?" Daniel flushed. "There's also the matter of your father's sudden departure from the board of his previous company. A mutual decision made when he chose to focus on humanitarian projects instead of weapons development." Samira's voice remained steady, but Karim noticed her hand move to her veil, her tell when she was holding back stronger emotions. "Is there anything else you'd like to know about my family, Mr. Reed? Perhaps what we eat for breakfast?" The tension in the room was palpable. Karim found himself torn between his loyalty to his oldest friend and his growing trust in his wife. "Daniel," he said finally, "I appreciate your concern, but you're too blinded by her act to see what's really going on," Daniel snapped. "She shows up with her mysterious veil and her perfect solutions to everything, and you don't find that suspicious at all." "That's enough." Karim's voice was quiet but firm. "You're talking about my wife." The words hung in the air, surprising even Karim with their intensity. Daniel stared at him for a long moment before gathering his papers and leaving without another word. In the silence that followed, Karim turned to find Samira watching him with an unreadable expression. "You defended me," she said softly. "You defended yourself quite well," he pointed out. "So I just finished what you started. Still." She smiled, and for a moment he wished he could see her whole face. "Thank you." The next few days brought new challenges. News of their European project's troubles had leaked to the press, causing their stock to dip. Karim found himself working longer hours trying to contain the damage, but he also found himself increasingly aware of Samira's presence, her quiet strength, her intuitive understanding of both business and people, the way she'd brought unexpected warmth to his formerly sterile life. One evening, he came home to find her in their garden, speaking quietly on the phone in her native language. He caught the word father and noticed the tension in her shoulders. When she ended the call, he could tell something was wrong. "Is everything all right?" he asked, joining her on the garden bench. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her veil. "My father is facing some challenges," she finally said. "The humanitarian project he left his previous company for, it's in danger of losing funding." Karim felt an unexpected urge to reach out to her to offer comfort. Instead, he asked, "Can I help?" She turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "You would do that? We're partners, aren't we?" he said, echoing her words from weeks ago. "In everything." The smile she gave him then made his heart skip a beat. But before she could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. The board was calling an emergency meeting. There were rumors of a hostile takeover attempt, and some board members were questioning his leadership. As he read the message, another one came through from Daniel. "Hope you're ready for the truth about your wife. Tomorrow's board meeting will be interesting." Karim looked at Samira, who was still sitting beside him, her face turned toward the setting sun. In the golden light, she looked both vulnerable and strong, a paradox he was only beginning to understand. Whatever Daniel was planning, whatever secrets still lay between them, Karim realized with startling clarity that he no longer saw their marriage as just a business arrangement. The question was, did she feel the same way? The Al Rahman Group's boardroom had never felt more tense. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished table where board members sat in uncomfortable silence. Karim stood at the head of the table, his usual confident posture masking his inner turmoil. "These accusations are serious," Elizabeth Morton, one of the senior board members, stated gravely. "If there's any truth to them, the implications for our shareholders could be devastating." Daniel stood at the opposite end of the room, a projector remote in his hand. "I've spent weeks gathering this information," he said, his voice carrying a note of triumph that made Karim's jaw clench. The Nasser family's involvement in several failed tech companies, the mysterious resignations, the hidden accounts. The boardroom door opened, and Samira walked in. Her elegance and poise were unchanged, but Karim noticed her hand briefly touch her veil, that subtle sign of tension he'd come to recognize. She took a seat quietly, nodding respectfully to the board members. "Mrs. Al-Rahman," Daniel said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "How convenient that you've joined us. I was just explaining to the board about your family's interesting business history." "Please continue, Mr. Reed," Samira replied calmly. "I'm quite interested in hearing your interpretation of events you weren't present for." For the next 30 minutes, Daniel presented his case. He showed documents suggesting financial irregularities, highlighted news articles about failed ventures, and emphasized the mysterious circumstances surrounding her father's career change. With each point, he cast suspicious glances at Samira's veiled face, as if her partial covering was proof of duplicity. When he finished, the room was silent. Board members exchanged worried glances. Karim felt the weight of their concern, but his eyes were fixed on his wife. Throughout Daniel's presentation, she had remained perfectly still, her visible eye focused and clear. "May I respond?" she asked quietly. Elizabeth Morton nodded. "Please do." Samira stood, smoothing her silk blazer with practiced grace. "Mr. Reed has done an impressive job of research," she began, "but he's missing crucial context. Those failed tech companies, they were testing grounds for innovations that later became industry standards. The mysterious resignations, key employees who followed my father to establish one of the largest humanitarian technology initiatives in our region." She began pulling up her own documentation on the screen, her voice growing stronger with each point. "The hidden accounts were a protective measure during a time of political instability, all fully disclosed to regulatory authorities. As for my father's career change," she paused, her hand briefly touching her veil again, "he chose purpose over profit, a decision I've always admired." Then she revealed something unexpected, a series of patents and innovations that had emerged from their supposedly failed ventures. Technologies that were now being used in sustainable energy projects, medical facilities, and educational programs worldwide. Everything Mr. Reed presented is true, she concluded, but truth without context is just another form of deception. My family's work has always been about long-term impact over short-term profit. It's why we sought an alliance with the Al Rahman Group. We saw the same potential for meaningful change. The board members were leaning forward now, their expressions shifting from concern to interest. Elizabeth Morton was nodding thoughtfully. But Daniel wasn't finished. "And what about your personal secrets?" he demanded. "The real reason for your veil, the accident that's enough." Karim's voice cut through the room like a thunderclap. "You've gone too far, Daniel." "Have I?" Daniel turned to face him. "Or are you too blinded by her manipulation to see what's happening? She's taking control of your company piece by piece, the charity initiatives, the technology integration, the staff restructuring. She's changing everything you built." Karim looked around the room at the empire he'd spent years creating, the pristine offices, the perfect efficiency, the relentless pursuit of profit. Then he looked at his wife, who had brought warmth to his home, purpose to his work, and something else he wasn't quite ready to name to his heart. "Yes," he said finally, "she is changing things. She's making them better." Daniel's face reddened. "You can't be serious. After everything I've shown you, you've shown me that my wife comes from a family that values innovation and social impact," Karim interrupted. "That she has experience turning challenging situations into opportunities for growth. That she's exactly who we need on our board." The room erupted in murmurs. Elizabeth Morton was the first to speak. "Are you proposing to appoint Mrs. Al Rahman to the board?" "Yes," Karim said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "And I move to launch a full investigation into who leaked confidential company information to the press during our recent European crisis." Daniel's face went pale. Samira's visible eye widened slightly, the only sign of surprise she showed. As the board members began discussing the proposal, Karim caught his wife's gaze. For the first time, he didn't see her as a mystery to be solved or an asset to be managed. He saw her as a partner who had been fighting for their company's future all along, even when he hadn't realized it needed saving. The aftermath of the board meeting left the Al Rahman Group in a state of transformation. Daniel's swift departure, resignation submitted before the investigation could begin, created ripples throughout the organization. But it was Samira's appointment to the board that truly marked the beginning of change. One evening, a week after the dramatic meeting, Karim found himself in their home office, reviewing old company documents with new eyes. The room had evolved since Samira's arrival, just like everything else in his life. Colorful art pieces now hung alongside their business awards, and comfortable reading chairs had replaced the stark modern furniture he'd originally chosen. "Your father called," Samira said from the doorway, holding 2 cups of traditional Arabic coffee. "He's quite pleased with the company's new direction." Karim accepted the coffee, noting how natural it felt now to share these quiet moments. "He said you reminded him of my mother again. He doesn't say that lightly." Samira took her usual seat across from him, her veil catching the warm lamplight. "Tell me about her," she asked softly. Karim was quiet for a moment, memories washing over him. She was brilliant, not just in business but in understanding people. She could walk into a room and immediately sense the dynamics, the unspoken tensions, the opportunities for connection. After she passed, I think I tried to strip all of that away from the business, make it purely about numbers and efficiency. Because emotions felt dangerous, Samira finished gently. "Yes." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Until you came along and complicated everything." She laughed softly, and the sound made his heart skip a beat. "Complicated? Or enriched?" "Both," he admitted. Then, gathering his courage, he asked something he'd been wondering for weeks. "Why did you agree to this marriage, Samira? You could have found a partner who shared your values from the start. Instead, you chose someone who needed reminding of his own humanity." She set down her coffee cup, her visible eye meeting his gaze steadily. "I saw something in you, Karim. Behind the cold efficiency and perfect control, I saw someone who had the potential to be not just successful, but truly impactful." Her words touched something deep within him. "And now, what do you see now?" Samira stood, moving to the window where the city lights sparkled below. "I see a man beginning to understand that true strength isn't about control, it's about having the courage to be vulnerable." Karim joined her at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "Is that why you wear the veil? To control how vulnerable you allow yourself to be?" She turned to face him, and in the soft light he could see the complexity of emotions in her visible eye. "The veil, it started as a way to protect myself. After the accident, people's reactions were often difficult. They saw the scar before. They saw me. But over time it became something else. A reminder that true connection isn't about appearance. Like seeing the potential for change in a cold-hearted businessman," he asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Exactly like that." She reached up, her fingers brushing the edge of her veil. "Would you like to know me, Karim? Really know me?" His heart thundered in his chest. "Only if you want to show me." With slow, deliberate movements, Samira began to lift her veil. Karim caught her hand gently, stopping her. "Wait," he said softly. "You don't have to do this, not to prove anything." "To me, I'm not proving anything," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm choosing to be vulnerable with someone I've grown to trust, someone I've grown to—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning hung in the air between them. Karim realized he was still holding her hand, and neither of them seemed inclined to let go. "Before you do this," he said, "I need you to know something. These past months, you haven't just changed the company, you've changed me, the way I see the world, the way I understand success, the way I—" He paused, searching for the right words. "The way I feel about us?" Samira's visible eyes softened with emotion. "And how do you feel about us?" Before he could answer, a sudden commotion erupted from outside, the sound of camera flashes and raised voices. They moved to the window to see a group of reporters gathering at their gate. Breaking news was scrolling across the screens of nearby buildings. Tech giant announces hostile takeover bid for Al Rahman Group. Their phones began, buzzing simultaneously with urgent messages. The crisis they'd been prepared for had finally arrived, but not in the way they'd expected. As they stood there, hands still joined, Karim realized something profound. He wasn't afraid. For the first time in his career, he was facing a crisis, not as a solitary figure, but as part of a true partnership. He turned to Samira, seeing in her steady gaze the same determination he felt. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not just as business partners, but as something deeper, something that had grown naturally despite all his attempts to keep their relationship purely professional. The veil remained in place for now, but something else had been unveiled, the truth of what they were becoming to each other. As they began planning their response to the crisis, Karim understood that some revelations didn't require words or dramatic gestures. Sometimes they happened in quiet moments of trust, in the gradual understanding that love could grow in the most unexpected circumstances. The next 48 hours at Al Rahman Group headquarters were intense. News of the hostile takeover attempt by Global Innovations Corp, one of their biggest rivals, had sent shockwaves through the business world. Karim and Samira worked tirelessly, coordinating with their legal team, reassuring investors, and developing counter-strategies. "They're not just after our assets," Samira observed, studying the market analysis on her tablet. "They want our new sustainable technology patents, the ones we've been developing for the community development projects." Karim nodded, loosening his tie as he paced their emergency command center. The space had been transformed into a war room, with multiple screens displaying real-time market data and news updates. Global Innovations has been trying to enter the sustainable development sector for years, but something about this feels personal. "It is personal," came a familiar voice from the doorway. They turned to see Elizabeth Morton, looking grave. "I've just received some interesting information. Guess who's been appointed as Global Innovation's new strategic advisor? Daniel, Karim and Samira said in unison. Elizabeth nodded. He's been feeding them information for months. The European crisis, the leaked documents, the attacks on Samira's family. It was all orchestrated to weaken us for this moment. Karim felt a surge of anger, but when he looked at Samira, he saw something else in her visible eye. Not anger, but determination. She was already pulling up new documents on her screen. "We've been looking at this wrong," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "We've been playing defense, but we need to show them and the world what they're really trying to destroy." Over the next several hours, Samira outlined a bold plan. Instead of merely defending against the takeover, they would launch a comprehensive public campaign showcasing the real-world impact of their sustainable technology projects. Community centers powered by their solar innovations, schools using their educational software, hospitals equipped with their energy-efficient systems. "The public needs to understand that this isn't just about business," she explained. "It's about the future we're trying to build." Karim watched her in amazement. Even under intense pressure, she maintained her grace and vision. Her veil caught the early morning light as she presented her ideas to the board members who had gathered. "In the crisis room, Mrs. Al-Rahman's strategy is sound," Elizabeth said after the presentation. "But Global Innovations is powerful. They'll try to discredit us, especially—" She hesitated, glancing at Samira's veil. "Let them try," Karim said firmly. "We have nothing to hide." As the board members filed out to begin implementing their strategy, Samira touched Karim's arm lightly. "Thank you for trusting me, again." He covered her hand with his own. "Always." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. They gave interviews, hosted site visits to their community projects, and released detailed impact reports. Samira was particularly compelling in a live television interview, her partial veil adding an air of mystery that actually worked in their favor, making viewers focus on her words rather than her appearance. But Global Innovations fought back hard. They launched a smear campaign, suggesting that the Al-Rahman Group's community projects were merely a front for tax evasion. Daniel appeared on business news channels, hinting at dark secrets and hidden agendas. The pressure began to take its toll. One evening, Karim found Samira in their home office, staring at a photo of her father on her phone. Her shoulders were tense, her hand repeatedly touching her veil, a gesture he now recognized as a sign of deep distress. "What is it?" he asked softly. "They're targeting my father's humanitarian projects now," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Using his past to discredit his work. All those people who depend on those programs." Without thinking, Karim moved behind her chair and placed his hands on her shoulders, offering silent support. To his surprise, she leaned back against him, accepting the comfort he offered. "We'll protect them," he promised. "All of them." She tilted her head back to look up at him, her visible eye bright with unshed tears. "When did you become the idealistic one?" "I learned from the best," he smiled down at her. Then, more seriously, "We're stronger together, Samira. They don't understand that. Daniel never understood that." She reached up to cover one of his hands with hers. "And you, do you understand it now?" The moment was interrupted by an urgent call. Global Innovations had just announced a partnership with one of their major investors. The stock price was dropping. They needed to respond immediately. As they rushed back to headquarters, Karim found himself thinking about Samira's question. He did understand now, not just the strength of their partnership, but the depth of his feelings for her. Somewhere along the way, between board meetings and community projects, between crisis management and quiet evening conversations, he had fallen in love with his wife. The realization should have frightened him. Instead, it filled him with a new sense of purpose. As they walked into the emergency board meeting, shoulders brushing, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not just as business partners, not just as husband and wife, but as two people who had found something rare and precious in the most unexpected circumstances. The question was, did she feel the same way? And would they survive this crisis long Enough for him to find out? The battle for Al Rahman Group intensified with each passing day. Global innovations, aggressive tactics had the business world's full attention, but it was the Al Rahman Group's response that truly captured the public's imagination. Instead of engaging in corporate warfare, they opened their doors, inviting media to witness their community impact firsthand. Samira's influence was evident in every aspect of their strategy. She arranged for beneficiaries of their programs to share their stories, showcasing how the company's technologies had transformed lives. Young entrepreneurs, healthcare workers, and educators spoke passionately about the difference these innovations had made in their communities. "Your wife is quite the strategist," remarked James Chen, one of their longest-serving board members, as they watched Samira guide a group of journalists through their latest sustainable housing project. "She's turning a hostile takeover attempt into a public referendum on corporate responsibility." Karim felt a surge of pride as he watched her. She moved with such grace, her partial veil catching the sunlight as she explained their innovative solar integration systems. The journalists were captivated, not just by the technology, but by her genuine passion for its impact. But global innovations had one more card to play. That evening, as Karim and Samira were reviewing the day's media coverage in their home office, Daniel appeared on a major business network. "The Al Rahman Group's charitable works make for good headlines," he said, his smile cold. "But shareholders deserve to know the truth about Samira Nasser Al Rahman. Why does she hide behind that veil? What happened during those mysterious years when her family's companies were failing? And why did she really agree to this marriage?" Samira's hand flew to her veil, that telling gesture that always betrayed her emotions. Karim moved to turn off the television, but she stopped him. "No," she said quietly. "Let's hear what else he has to say." Daniel continued, his accusations growing more pointed. He suggested that Samira's accident had been more than just an accident, hinting at corporate espionage and family scandals. He questioned her father's humanitarian work, implying hidden financial motivations. When the interview ended, the room was silent except for the soft hum of their computers. Karim watched as Samira stood and walked to the window, her silhouette stark against the night sky. "He's trying to make me angry," she said finally, "trying to provoke a reaction that will prove his points about me." Karim joined her at the window. "Are you angry?" She turned to face him, and even with the veil, he could sense her smile. "No, I'm grateful." "Grateful?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, because every attack, every accusation, every attempt to discredit me has only shown me more clearly who my true allies are." She reached out and straightened his tie, a gesture that had become familiar and precious. "Who my true partner is?" The tenderness in her voice made his heart race. "Samira, Their phones buzzed simultaneously, urgent messages from the office. Global Innovations had just announced a higher bid for their shares, and some major investors were wavering. "We should go," Samira said, already gathering her things. "Wait." Karim caught her hand. "What you said about true partners, I need you to know something." She stilled, her visible eye fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "When I agreed to this marriage, I thought I was making a business decision," he continued. "But you've shown me a different way to live, to lead, to love." The word slipped out before he could stop it. Samira's breath caught audibly, her hand tightening in his. Before either of them could speak, another urgent message came through. The board was assembling for an emergency session. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them, something profound and irreversible. As they drove to the office, Karim couldn't help stealing glances at his wife. The city lights played across her veil, creating patterns of shadow and light. He thought about all the ways she had changed his life, his company, his heart. The takeover attempt suddenly seemed secondary to this larger revelation. He was in love with his wife, and he had no idea if she felt the same way. They arrived at headquarters to find the building buzzing with activity despite the late hour. Board members were gathering, lawyers were preparing documents, and the PR team was monitoring social media reactions. But as they stepped into the elevator together, Samira spoke softly. You didn't finish what you were saying. About love. Karim looked at her, his heart pounding. But before he could respond, the elevator doors opened, and they were swept into the chaos of the crisis. Yet, something had changed. In the way their hands brushed as they reviewed documents, in the lingering glances they shared across the conference room, in the unspoken understanding that they were fighting for something far more precious than just their company. The question of love would have to wait, but it hung between them like a promise, making even this corporate battle feel like part of a larger, more personal journey. As they faced the board together, Karim realized that winning against global innovations was no longer just about business survival. It was about protecting the future he hoped to build with the remarkable woman by his side. The Al Rahman Group's annual international conference couldn't have come at a more crucial time. As hundreds of business leaders, investors, and media representatives gathered in their Dubai headquarters, the tension was palpable. Global Innovations' hostile takeover attempt had reached a critical point, with shareholders set to vote on the bid in just 3 days. Karim stood backstage, watching Samira prepare for her keynote address. She was reviewing her notes with characteristic focus, her elegant grey suit complementing the intricate design of her veil. Even after all these months, she still took his breath away. "The entire business world is watching," Elizabeth Morton said, joining him. "Global Innovations has their representatives in the audience, including Daniel." Karim nodded, his jaw tightening. "Let them watch. They're about to learn what real innovation looks like." Samira approached them, radiating quiet confidence. "Everything's ready. The community leaders are in place. The demonstration systems are working perfectly, and our surprise guest is waiting in the wings." The surprise guest had been her idea, Samira's father, Dr. Nasser, making his first public appearance since stepping down from his previous company. His presence would either validate their mission or give their opponents more ammunition, depending on how the next few hours unfolded. As Samira took the stage, the massive auditorium fell silent. The spotlight caught her veil, making it shimmer as she began to speak. "Innovation isn't just about technology," she started, her voice clear and strong. "It's about impact, about looking at the world, not just as it is, but as it could be." The screens behind her came alive with images of their projects: sustainable housing developments, solar-powered schools, advanced medical facilities in underserved areas. But instead of just showing the buildings, they showed the people whose lives had been transformed. "These aren't just corporate achievements," Samira continued. "They're promises kept, to communities, to families, to future generations." From his position backstage, Karim could see Daniel in the audience whispering to his Global Innovations colleagues. But the rest of the crowd was captivated by Samira's presentation. She went on to reveal their latest initiative, a groundbreaking integration of their sustainable technology with artificial intelligence, designed to make clean energy solutions more accessible to developing communities. The demonstration was flawless, showing real-time impact data from pilot programs around the world. Then came the moment they'd planned for. Samira's voice softened slightly as she said, "To help explain the vision behind this technology, please. Welcome someone who taught me that true innovation must serve humanity. My father, Dr. Hassan Nasser." The audience murmured in surprise as Dr. Nasser took the stage. He looked distinguished in his traditional dress, his warm smile matching his daughter's as they embraced briefly. For the next 20 minutes, father and daughter presented their shared vision for corporate responsibility and technological innovation. They addressed the past controversies head-on, explaining how apparent failures had actually been stepping stones to greater breakthroughs. Karim watched with pride as Samira handled challenging questions from the audience with grace and wisdom. Even when Daniel stood up to ask a pointed question about her family's previous business dealings, she responded with such clarity and conviction that he sat down, looking frustrated. But it was during the final segment of her presentation that everything changed. As Samira was explaining their long-term vision, the main screen behind her suddenly went dark. When it came back on, it showed internal documents from Global Innovations, revealing their true plans for the Al Rahman Group's assets. "What is this?" Samira asked, momentarily startled. From his position backstage, Karim saw Daniel stand up abruptly, his face pale. The documents showed that Global Innovations intended to strip the company of its sustainable technology patents and shut down the community development programs, seeing them as unnecessary charitable endeavors. The audience erupted in murmurs as more documents appeared, emails between Daniel and Global Innovations executives planning the hostile takeover months in advance. Their strategy had included personal attacks on Samira, deliberately trying to undermine her credibility. Karim rushed onto the stage as security personnel moved toward Daniel, but before anyone could reach him, Daniel grabbed something from his jacket and ran toward the stage. In the confusion that followed, he collided, with Samira sending them both stumbling. Time seemed to slow down as Karim watched Samira try to regain her balance. Her hand flew to her face, but it was too late. Her veil had been torn away in the chaos. The auditorium fell silent as Samira straightened up, her entire face visible for the first time in public. The scar that ran down the right side of her face caught the stage lights. Not a disfiguring mark as rumors had suggested, but a subtle line that did nothing to diminish her beauty. If anything, it added character to her striking features, telling a story of resilience and strength. Instead of trying to cover her face, Samira stood tall, meeting the audience's gaze directly. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Dr. Nasser began to applaud. Elizabeth Morton joined in, followed by others in the audience. Soon the entire auditorium was filled with applause, not just for Samira's revealed face, but for everything she represented: grace under pressure, unwavering integrity, and the courage to stand up for what she believed in. As security led a defeated-looking Daniel away, Karim stepped closer to his wife. Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the unspoken feelings between them seemed to crystallize. But before either of them could speak, they were surrounded by board members and reporters, all demanding responses to the revealed documents and the dramatic events that had just unfolded. The crisis wasn't over. They still had to deal with the shareholder vote and the legal implications of Global Innovations' revealed plans. But something fundamental had shifted, both in the business world's perception of their company and in the private world between Karim and Samira. As they faced the crowd together, Karim felt Samira's hand slip into his. When he squeezed it gently, she squeezed back, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them exactly as they stood now, side by side, stronger together than they ever could have been apart. The hours following the conference were a blur of activity. News of Global Innovations' exposed plans dominated business headlines worldwide, while social media buzzed with images of Samira's unveiled face and praise for her composed handling of the situation. The Al Rahman Group's stock price soared as shareholders publicly pledged their support against the hostile takeover. It was past midnight when Karim and Samira finally returned home. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. Samira went straight to their garden, her favorite place to think, and Karim followed, carrying 2 cups of the chamomile tea she favored in the evenings. She stood by the fountain, her face unobscured for the first time in their home. The moonlight softened her features, including the scar that had been hidden for so long. When she turned to accept the tea from him, Karim was struck by the openness in her expression. "You're staring," she said softly, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "You're beautiful," he replied simply. "With or without the veil. With or without the scar, you're just beautiful." A slight blush colored her cheeks. The scar, it happened during a prototype testing accident at one of our labs. I was young, just starting to work with my father. Everyone expected me to hide away after that, to take a quiet administrative role. Instead, I threw myself into the work even more deeply. "That's why you understand the human side of innovation so well," Karim realized. "You've experienced both the risks and the rewards." She nodded, taking a sip of her tea. The veil began as a shield against judgment, but it became something more. A test, in a way, to see who would look past it to what really mattered. "Did I pass?" he asked. Half joking, half serious, Samira set down her tea and turned to face him fully. "You did more than pass, Karim. You changed. Not because of anything I did, but because you allowed yourself to see things differently, to feel things differently. The vulnerability in her voice made his heart ache. He stepped closer, reaching out to trace the line of her scar with gentle fingers. She closed her eyes at his touch, leaning slightly into his hand. "I was so focused on protecting myself," he admitted quietly. "From feelings, from connection, from the mess of truly caring about something or someone. Then you came into my life with your compassion and your wisdom and your mysterious veil, and suddenly all my carefully constructed walls meant nothing." She opened her eyes, and the emotion in them took his breath away. "And now," she whispered, "now I know that real strength isn't about walls or control. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to care, to love." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Samira. Not because of any business arrangement or strategic alliance. I love you because you showed me what it means to have purpose beyond profit, to find beauty in imperfection, to be truly alive instead of just existing." Tears sparkled in her eyes as she covered his hands with her own. "I hoped," she said softly. "From the beginning, I hoped you would be the man I saw beneath all that cold efficiency, the man who could learn to see with his heart as well as his mind. And did you succeed in your mission?" he asked, smiling slightly. Instead of answering, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was their first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. Like every moment since their arranged marriage had been leading to this one perfect understanding. When they finally parted, Samira's eyes were shining. "I love you too," she whispered. "The man you were, the man you've become, and every version of you in between." Their phones buzzed simultaneously. More news about global innovations, more requests for statements about the day's events. But for once, the business world could wait. Here in their garden, under the stars, they had found something far more precious than corporate success. Karim pulled Samira close, breathing in the familiar scent of jasmine that always surrounded her. Tomorrow they would deal with shareholders and legal proceedings, with press statements and business strategies. But tonight was for them, for the truth of their feelings, for the trust they had built, for the love that had grown in the most unexpected of arrangements. "What happens now?" Samira asked, her head resting against his chest. Karim smiled, running his fingers through her hair. "Now we build something new, together, not just in business, but in life. If you're willing to be my partner in everything?" She looked up at him, her face radiant with joy. "Always," she said, "in everything." The fountain bubbled peacefully beside them, and the night air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. In their garden, a place that had transformed from a sterile landscape to a living sanctuary under Samira's care, they held each other and marveled at how an arranged marriage had led to the most genuine love either of them had ever known. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for the grandest hall in the Al Rahman Group headquarters. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating the faces of hundreds of investors, board members, and media representatives. The vote on Global Innovation's takeover bid would determine not just the future of the company, but the legacy of two families united by an arranged marriage that had blossomed into something extraordinary. Karim and Samira entered together, their united front drawing all eyes in the room. Samira had chosen not to wear her veil, her scar visible as a badge of honor rather than a mark to hide. The whispers that followed them were not of scandal or speculation, but of admiration for the couple who had transformed a corporate battle into a movement for meaningful change in the business world. "Ready?" Karim whispered, squeezing her hand as they approached the podium. Samira's smile was radiant. "With you? Always." The presentation they had prepared together told the story not just of a company, but of a vision. They showed the real numbers behind their community projects, not just the costs but the returns in terms of sustainable development, job creation, and technological advancement. Every project that Global Innovations had dismissed as charitable waste was revealed as a strategic investment in the future. Dr. Nasser joined them on stage to present the latest breakthrough from their combined research teams, a revolutionary clean energy system that could power entire communities at a fraction of the traditional cost. The technology represented everything the Al Rahman Group now stood for: innovation with purpose, profit with principles. Elizabeth Morton presented the financial projections, showing how the company's new direction had actually strengthened its market position. "This isn't just about maintaining shareholder value," she explained. "It's about growing it sustainably while making a real difference in the world." As the evidence mounted, the mood in the room shifted palpably. Global Innovations representatives looked increasingly uncomfortable, especially when Samira revealed their latest initiative, a global foundation that would ensure the company's humanitarian projects would be protected and expanded regardless of any future corporate changes. "My father taught me that true innovation serves humanity," Samira said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "My husband showed me that business success and social responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. Together we've proven that doing good is good business." The voting began, each shareholder making their choice electronically. As the results were tallied, Karim found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. He looked at his wife, remembering the first time he'd seen her veiled and mysterious in his office. How could he have known then that she would not only save his company, but transform his entire worldview? The results appeared on the massive screens. Global Innovations' takeover bid had been rejected by an overwhelming majority. The hall erupted in applause as additional resolutions passed, formally approving the new foundation and the expanded community development initiatives. In the celebration that followed, Karim noticed Daniel slipping quietly toward the exit. His former friend looked defeated, his alliance with Global Innovations having cost him everything: his reputation, his position, and most importantly, the friendship they had once shared. "Should we stop him?" Samira asked softly, following Karim's gaze. Karim shook his head. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but they can remind us to build better ones." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of handshakes, congratulations, and media interviews. The business world was captivated by the story: the arranged marriage that had evolved into a powerful partnership, the corporate battle that had become a revolution in business ethics, the veiled woman who had shown that true beauty lay in strength of character and clarity of purpose. That evening they hosted a celebration at their home, but not the kind of corporate gathering they were used to. Instead, their garden was filled with people from all walks of life: community leaders from their development projects, students from their educational programs, healthcare workers from their medical initiatives, and yes, their fellow business leaders too. As Karim watched Samira move through the crowd, greeting each guest with genuine warmth, he was struck by how much his definition of success had changed. The cold, calculating businessman who had agreed to an arranged marriage for strategic purposes would never have imagined finding such fulfillment in creating positive change. Later, as the party wound down, they found a quiet moment together by their favorite spot near the fountain. The garden was lit with soft lanterns, the air sweet with jasmine blossoms. "What are you thinking about?" Samira asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "About legacy," he replied, pulling her close. "Not just what we leave behind in business, but what we create together. The lives we touch, the changes we inspire, the love we share." She reached up to trace his jaw with gentle fingers. "And what do you see in our future?" "Everything," he smiled, "as long as we're together." As if to emphasize his words, a shooting star streaked across the sky above them. They both laughed at the timing, and Karim pulled Samira into a kiss that held all the promise of their shared tomorrow. The garden around them, once a sterile landscape transformed by Samira's care into a vibrant paradise, seemed to symbolize their journey, from arranged marriage to true partnership, from cold efficiency to warm purpose, from separate paths to a shared destiny. As the stars twinkled above them, they held each other close, knowing that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. 1 year later, the Al Rahman Group's headquarters buzzed with excitement. The company was hosting its first International Innovation for Humanity Summit, bringing together business leaders, technology pioneers, and community advocates from around the world. The event represented everything Karim and Samira had worked to achieve: a new model of corporate leadership that balanced profit with purpose. Karim stood at the same window where he had first discussed his arranged marriage with his father, but everything else had changed. The office, once a monument to cold efficiency, now featured warm touches that reflected their shared vision. Art from community projects, prototypes of their sustainable technologies, and photos of the lives they'd helped transform. "Remembering something?" Samira's voice came from behind him. He turned to see his wife entering the office, elegant as always in a deep blue suit that matched his own. The scar on her face caught the morning light, a mark of strength that she no longer had any reason to hide. "Just thinking about how it all began," he smiled, pulling her into his arms. "Right here, where I thought I was making a simple business decision." She laughed softly. "And instead? Instead, I found everything I never knew I was looking for." Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sheikh Hassan, Karim's father, entered with Dr. Nasser. The two men had become close friends over the past year, united by their pride in their children's achievements. "The next generation of arranged marriages want to meet their matchmakers," Sheikh Hassan said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. He was referring to their newest initiative, a mentorship program that paired established business leaders with young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. The program had been Samira's idea, inspired by their own journey from arranged partners to soulmates. The main conference hall was packed when they arrived. Young faces filled the rows, each person carrying dreams of making their mark on the world. As Karim and Samira took the stage together, their hands naturally intertwined. "1 year ago," Karim began, "I stood in this building and agreed to an arranged marriage that I thought was about business strategy. I couldn't have known that I was actually agreeing to a complete transformation of my company, my perspectives, and my heart." Samira squeezed his hand before addressing the crowd. "They say love finds us in unexpected places. Sometimes it comes disguised as a business arrangement. Sometimes it hides behind a veil. But when we have the courage to look deeper, to trust in possibility, we find that the greatest innovations aren't in technology or business models. They're in the ways we open our hearts to new ways of seeing the world." Together, they announced the expansion of their foundation's work, new educational initiatives, increased funding for sustainable technology research, and innovative partnerships with communities around the world. The Al Rahman Group had become a model for a new kind of corporate success, proving that compassion and competition could coexist. After the presentations, they escaped to their garden at home, the place where they had first begun to see each other clearly. The space had flourished even more over the past year, much like their love for each other. "Do you ever miss it?" Karim asked as they sat by the fountain. "The veil, the mystery." Samira shook her head, leaning into his embrace. "The mystery was never in the veil. It was in learning to trust, to be vulnerable, to love without guarantees. And that mystery," she turned to face him, her eyes shining, "that only deepens with time." As if to prove her point, she pulled out an envelope from her jacket. "Speaking of mysteries, I have something to tell you." Karim opened it to find a small black and white image, an ultrasound. His heart stopped for a moment as he realized what he was seeing. "Really?" he whispered, looking at his wife with wonder. Samira nodded, happy tears in her eyes. "Really? Our next great adventure begins in about 7 months." He pulled her close, overwhelmed with joy. Their journey had come full circle, from an arranged marriage based on business interests to a true partnership built on love, trust, and shared purpose. Now they would build not just companies and communities, but a family of their own. As the sun set over their garden, casting golden light through the blooming flowers, Karim and Samira held each other close. Their story had become more than just a business success or a personal triumph. It had become a testament to the power of looking beyond appearances, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of letting love transform not just hearts, but entire worlds. Their arranged marriage had been just the beginning. Their love story, like the positive change they were creating in the world, would continue to grow and flourish, touching lives and inspiring others to believe in the power of unexpected possibilities. "I love you," Karim whispered, his hand resting gently over their growing miracle. "In everything," Samira replied with a radiant smile, completing their private motto. Above them, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had transformed not just 2 lives, but countless others. In the end, their greatest innovation hadn't been in technology or business strategy. It had been in proving that when hearts and minds align, anything is possible. The beginning